TXST. I'm so pleased to introduce our clinician for 4 o'clock, my friend Micah Killion, who Mike and I have known each other a number of years now and played a number of things gig-wise in Austin. And I always just so much enjoy being around him. He's a great trumpet player. Micah was the principal trumpet player with the Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. for about 5 years. Trained on Juilliard and Columbia Teachers College with a degree, performance degree in trumpet from Juilliard and an education degree from Columbia Teachers College. He's currently finishing a PhD in music and human learning, and he's just become a degree candidate, so that's really exciting. And hopefully we'll be getting his PhD very soon. So without further ado, I think that's all. Anything else I should say? We're so pleased to have Micah here.
So first I have an awkward question. Who has heard this presentation before? Okay, good. Lovely. I hope you get more out of it the second time. There's a lot of repeated stuff. If there's anything that's like, there's a few sort of surprises, so don't ruin it. Gosh. If everybody can, just go ahead and stand that if you can from where you're seated, and go ahead and answer those questions for about 3 minutes, if you would. Even if you've already done this before, I'd appreciate you taking a second to do that. All these answers will be anonymous, but I learn a lot about how people like y'all conceptualize practice. Because one of the things about getting a terminal degree is you can get lost in sort of a deep well of stuff, and I forget what people that don't think about this for 10 hours a day. It's good for me to be in touch with what normal humans are thinking about practice. So just maybe 2 minutes, if you would. Give about another 30 seconds. Okay, so throw a period in there, just go ahead and press enter, whatever you got in there, I'll make some sense of that later, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. So as Dr. Cannon said, my name is Micah. I did some trumpet stuff before now. Some of it was pretty interesting, some of it was kind of not so interesting. But the thing I do now is I study the neural and cognitive processes that underpin music learning. So I have put my performance career aside a little bit to dig deeper into what it is that happens up here that allows human beings to make music the way we make music. Specifically, my research has to do with practice. And so, to answer the first question, what is practice? Now, everybody's got their own version of how this works, but what I'm going to tell you is that all of those things fit into this one story. All effective practice is essentially taking passages of music that are currently undoable and making them doable. Whether that's a note, a task, a volume, a phrase, a concerto, a brass motet recital. That's undoable and making it doable. That's how we bridge those two things. Now specifically, this is done through an iterative process. We're going to talk about the word iteration. An iterative process that perceives any discrepancy between how we want music to go and how we actually play music. If there's any difference between those two things, we make it smaller. So we got an idea of how we want to sound when we play our instruments, and then we sound this other way, most of the time, and then over time, we make those two things closer together. And actually what ends up happening is that the way we intend to make music actually gets more advanced and more evolved and more subtle, right? That's why graduate students in this room you don't aim to make the same sounds you did when you were in 9th grade. So we have the way we want to play music and the way we actually play music. Practice makes that smaller. Now the answer to the second question, how? The way we get better at that is by getting better at the movements that we use to play our instruments. Music is movement, and I don't mean that in like a metaphysical kind of way. Like if you want to make sound in the world, something's got to move. Something has to move in order to make sound, especially with most people in this room, I assume, are brass instrumentalists. We have to make something move. We make our lips vibrate by having some sort of muscle engagement here, some expulsion of air, an inhale if you're into that sort of thing, and then we engage our embouchure and we make some sounds. Maybe use some fingers, some jaw, some tongue. But we get better at those movements to create more sounds that are closer to the way we intend to play. Practice is getting better at the movements we use to play music. Now there's good news and bad news here. The bad news is that we can't just think our way into playing our instruments better. That's not how it works. Now that may seem obvious to some of us, it may not. You may have never thought about this before, but it's not as if, just to give you an example, it's not as if I can go home tonight and read a book about shooting three-pointers in the NBA, and then tomorrow morning I magically get up and I've just thought my way into being really great at that task. That's not how it works. Now, it's not to say we can't move on purpose. We can't move volitionally. We choose things. Like I can say, dear left foot, make a kicking motion. Great, I did that. What I can't say is, dear left foot, now kick a 55-yard field goal. That's not how that works. We can't just talk or think our way into playing better music. And I might add that it's not as if you can just hear Whip Rudd and Mark Schubert and Keith Winking and Bob Cannon talk about how to play the trumpet better, and then you're better at the trumpet. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Because if that's how it works, I would just go to Whip and say, tell me the secret. And then we would all sound like Whip. It's not that easy. So we can't talk our way into doing things differently. We can't only think our way into doing things differently. We have to do our way into doing things differently. And that's what practice is. It's the experiences, the physical experiences of doing a thing over and over and over again, typically, so that we move in ways that create more sounds the way we want to sound. That's how practice works. That's the bad news, is that we can't talk or think our way onto it. The good news is that there's a lot of real estate up here that's actually dedicated to learning how to move better, which makes evolutionary sense, right? The reason we are all in this room alive right now is because there have been generations upon generations of human beings that have been really good at avoiding predators, finding food, finding mates. All of this takes movement. Leaving dangerous situations and putting ourselves in more safe situations. We have generations of that. So there's a lot of real estate up here that's dedicated to this incredibly complex problem. Now, just to give you a sense of how complex movement is, there's about 600 muscles in the human body, okay? So if we grossly oversimplify how they work into just being tense or relaxed, like on or off, gross oversimplification, because every single muscle has a continuum of tension that we can engage. But if we have just on and off, here's how many combinations of movements that our brain would have to make sense of. It's 2 to the power of 600. That's more atoms than there are in the entire universe. Gross oversimplification. Our brains are doing this constantly. You haven't seen me fall over once since I've been up here. I'm not going to guarantee it's not going to happen, but our brains are pretty good at solving this incredibly complex problem. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. Now, the benefit to understanding this process a little bit more than you currently do, it's not like there's going to be a quiz at the end of this, but as practicers, here are 2 big benefits. The first is that you're going to practice more efficiently. You can practice more efficiently. It's up to you whether or not you do anything here. But, and if you've never thought about it this way, here's an interesting thing. You have a fixed number of practice hours left in your life. It's easy sitting where you are to think about practice time as an unlimited resource. False. It is a fixed resource. You only have a certain number of hours left. So if you can stuff more learning, more change, more refinement, more improvement into that fixed amount of practice time, you're more likely to reach your career goals, your music goals, your human goals, whatever it is that drives you to practice. Fit more learning into that, and you're going to be more likely to accomplish those goals. So that's first. Second, true confession time. Who has ever had a practice session that ended in debilitating frustration? I've had not just days of that, I've had almost years of that myself. But if you understand this process a little bit more, you have the opportunity to contextualize those frustrations a little bit and practice differently as a result of it. So, the 3 things we're going to do, we're going to talk about some of the brain mechanisms behind or underneath music learning. We're going to look at a few expert trumpet players and see what they do to use these mechanisms in the brain. And then I'm going to leave you with a couple of really clear, concrete questions that you can use in your very next practice session to practice more efficiently and more effectively. Okay. Take 10 seconds and think about the last time you were confronted with a new piece of music that was way hard. Could have been yesterday, could have been last week. It was when you started working on jury stuff. I don't know. The last time you picked up a new piece of music that was hard. And now think about your first practice session with that. What did you do? Not what did you, I mean, you did the trumpet player, think of your trumpet player, look for the high notes, yeah, I get it. But when the next time you went into a practice room, what did you do? Now turn to the person next to you and confess your sins. What did you do? When you go and take 30 seconds. Just explain what you did. Okay. Confession time over. Next, look at that. Okay, if that's not shouting at you, that's hard. That's hard music. Some of you trumpet players might have noticed that that's for piccolo trumpet. That means it's going to sound a minor seventh higher than what it's written. It's hard. And it's slow. I think it's quarter note equals 36. But I'm not sure that makes it any easier. This is still hard. This is so hard, in fact, that I'm relatively confident that there's not a single human being on the planet that can play this beautifully and accurately the first time. Not Håkan, not Peter Evans. No one can play this beautifully and accurately the first time. It's that hard. What's that? With good. I mean, with. Sorry. Oh. Other than with. No, so we'd all have to practice this. For every single trumpet player that wants to accomplish this, you have to do something to it. That would be undoable for everyone, including Caleb. Right? There's a UNT group here somewhere around. Yeah, great. Including Caleb. Caleb would have to work on it. So, it's hard. And yet, here's Chris Coletti, right there, it's hard to see him in this. Here's Chris Coletti, a former member of the Canadian Brass, current associate professor of trumpet at Ithaca College in New York. Here's Chris playing the absolute snot out of this lick in the one performance he got of this piece. asking ourselves is, that lick was undoable for Chris when he first picked it up. And in some amount of time, actually I know it's about a year, he was able to make that good. And that is, this is just 30 seconds of a 17-minute piece that involves 4 trumpets and a Swedish cow horn. It's not like I just picked out a part that is the only thing he played well. He played this not out of the whole entire piece the one show we got. So the question we should be asking ourselves is, what the heck was Chris up to? What did he do in the practice room that got him from, I don't know how this thing goes, to, I can play this so well that if there's one show, it sounds like that? What are expert practicers up to in the practice room? Well, it so happens that with Chris, I have his second practice session here on tape. So think about what you just told your person next to you, what you did the first time you picked up a tricky thing. And let's watch what Chris does. So the first thing he's going to do, he's over here. And what you're going to hear, he's keeping a beat here. And just to give you a sense of how new he is to this lick, he's just keeping a beat, and he's trying to figure out where those quarter note triplets go. He's going he goes da, 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 1, 2, 3. He doesn't even know where the notes are, like where the rhythms are. That's how new he is. So he starts there, and then at a certain point you'll hear he starts going up there.
Da, da, da. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Bobby, 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 Bobby,
There's a German curse word coming up. If anyone speaks German is offended.
Shut up.
So what's Chris doing here? Singing. Yeah, what's he not doing? Yeah. So why is he singing? Yeah, just go ahead.
To make sure you can hear how it's supposed to sound.
Yeah, great. What I'm going to call that is clarifying his intent. And we're going to talk about why in a second. All right, give me what I do when I confront new difficult pieces looks exactly like what Chris did. And this now looks nothing like what Chris did. And this is sort of in between. Give me a thumbs up on where you were in that. Okay. There's not one right answer here. It's just interesting to see how one expert handles this. But I'm going to call that clarifying his intent. Now, let's talk a little bit about this thing. All right. This is a pretty important piece of equipment here. It's actually more important than a mouthpiece or valve oil. How we handle things in the skull ends up defining a lot about how we do things in the world. So when we want to move in the world, our brain creates what's called a motor command. That's just a set of instructions. That's like a 2 to the power of 600. It's got to give some sort of command for things below the spine, the rest of the body, to do in the world so that we can move successfully. Like if I want to get my water bottle there, my brain has to come up with a set of instructions to give the rest of my body so that I can go pick up that water bottle. Now, that's going to be influenced by things in the environment, like how far away that water bottle is. So the motor command is going to be different for the water bottle that's far away than if it was over here on the stand. I've got to walk over there, grab it. And that's going to depend on how heavy I think it is and whether it's two hands or one hand. So the brain creates a motor command for the body to follow. That may be obvious, although complicated, obvious. What's less intuitive is that what the brain does at the same time is it makes a forward model. It's called the efferents copy. It's not going to be on the exam, don't worry. And all the efferents copy is, it's a set of predicted feedback that motor command should have. So my brain makes a prediction about the way that picking up this water bottle should feel and look. And it would taste, smell, and sound if that was the thing, but it's not really with this thing. So I made a prediction about the way that should look and feel. And then I actually did it. So gathers actual sensory feedback. Then it just compares those two things. Did what it predicted was going to happen? There's really only two options that the brain cares about. Was it a match or was it a mismatch? Did the thing happen that the brain was predicting or no? And if it's a match, great, that's fine. The brain's not terribly interested in like remembering that. Think about how many successful steps that you've all taken today. You probably don't remember many of them. Maybe you remember 0 of them. They went exactly according to the way your brain thought it was going to go, and it was fine. Your brain stopped thinking about it. It didn't have to do anything with that information. It just goes, oh yeah, cool, stepping, that's fine. But as people that want to get better at a thing, the mismatch is really, really important. That's where real information about what we can do differently comes into play. Now, this efferents copy, prediction, can be a kind of an abstract concept. So I want to make this a little more real for you right now. So here's the task. I want you to raise your right hand when you hear me deviate from the pattern. People who have seen this one before, you know what's coming. So as soon as you hear me deviate from the pattern, just shoot that right hand way up. Okay? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Good. Yes. Okay. Now let me tell you what happened in your brain at that moment. So you heard me say 2, you didn't have any idea what was going on. Maybe you did. Maybe you guessed wildly. By the time I said 4, probably thought, oh, okay, even numbers. That's probably it. By the time I said 6, everybody in the room generally understood that I was saying even numbers. And at that point, everybody in the room's brain was making predictions about what it should hear next in the world. Your brain was predicting that you should hear 8 ringing around this beautiful hall. And lo and behold, that's what you heard. Match, done, next. Then your brain's making a prediction about what's next. 10, good, match, next. You're making a prediction about 12, and you heard 11, that's a deviation, raise the right hand. You didn't have to do any math problems, you didn't have to do anything except register that there was a deviation from the pattern, and you raise your hand. Great. That's how prediction plays a role in our lives. Now, here's the same task. Raise your right hand when you hear me deviate from the pattern. G, F, B flat, C, F, D, C, F, D, B flat, C, A, F. No. Oh, maybe something. So that was pictures in exhibition. Only the second to last note isn't A, it's G. And unless you've heard me do that one before, the thing is, you didn't have access to that error. I'm positive I did that wrong. I feel like maybe Whiff can confirm. I did say the wrong note, but no one's able to raise their hand and say that was an error because your brain wasn't able to make an accurate prediction about what's coming next because you didn't know the pattern. Without that prediction, you don't get the error. That's a big thing. We'll get back to that in just a minute. Now let's talk about how this really works when we practice. Who hasn't seen this workshop yet? Raise your hand. Great. My friend here on the end. Can I just use you as in the time? What's your name? Omar. Pronouns he and him? Great. Omar, this is your yellow brick. Okay? When you enter the practice studio, you are not an infant human being, as far as I can tell. So by the time you've made it this far in life, you have some music happening in your head. You have an idea of how you want music to go, right? You probably listened to tens of thousands of hours of music. You probably played thousands of hours of music. You may have even practiced for for thousands of hours at this point in your very young life. I don't know. No judgment. Quantity of practice time actually isn't that interesting anyway. You need to bury the lead here. So you've got some music happening in your head. Now what that means is that when you sit down to practice, you have an idea of how you intend to sound. It's not like you just pick up your, is that a bass trombone or a tenor? It's not like you pick up your trombone and just go, whoa, listen to that, whoa. No, you have an idea of how you want to sound. Armed with that, or equipped, I'm not using the verb armed, equipped with that intent, you take what's called a performance trial. And that in research land just means a try. You can take a try at a note, you can take a try at a sound, a dynamic, a phrase, a concerto. You just take a try. And thinking back to that brain slide, your brain's going to do two things. It's going to make a prediction about the way that should sound and feel, or smell and taste if you're a synesthete, but probably sound and feel. And then it's going to gather how it actually sounds and felt, and it's going to make a comparison between those two things. Then if there's a discrepancy, you have to perceive it. Remember that you can't perceive a discrepancy if you don't already make a prediction about the way it should sound. Like everybody missing the pictures and exhibition thing. No one got that error, I promise you it was there. But you have to perceive a discrepancy, and then like a good practicer, Omar, you're going to do something about that. Like, oh man, I really wanted to play Ride of the Valkyries like this, and I played it like this. I got to do some stuff to get that closer to the way I want to play it. And that happens over and over and over again in practice sessions. It's not uncommon for maybe an hour-long practice session to have over 1,000 performance trials. Many, many. Every time you go, no, that's 3. So you're going to do that, and then you have a new version of the way you intend to sound after all of that happens. And then that goes over and over and over. That's an iteration. So iteratively, you repeat this cycle over and over and over again. This cycle, by the way, is happening at every moment of your waking lives. Every time you make a movement, this is what's happening in your brain. This is the way it looks in the practice room. Omar, who's your teacher? Who's your studio teacher?
Andrew Glendenny.
Andrew. Okay, so let's say that this is Andrew's red brain. All right, Andrew's going to use exactly the same mechanism because we're humans and we have a brain. That is the mechanism that we use to learn how to move. But Andrew's got some interesting optimizations, we'll call it. So Andrew's older. He's done a lot more stuff with music. So rather than just having, not to say that you have a little amount of music in your brain, Omar, Andrew's got more. He's got a lot more happening. He's played a lot more. He's performed a lot more. He's practiced more. He's been taught more. He's listened more. That means that when he sits down to practice, he doesn't just have an idea of how he wants to sound. He's got a detailed idea of how he wants to sound. And that's a non-trivial difference. If you're aiming for something in the vicinity of an F sharp on beat 3, expert musicians are aiming for something far more subtle. Intonation, color, articulation, maybe a little vibrato at the end. Playing in tune with the oboe player 2 rows up, who's going to release and give that phrase to the clarinet. Expert musicians are thinking very, very subtly about what they intend to play at every single trial. Now, again, non-trivial, because what that does is it gives Andrew a detailed prediction for his brain. It's not some wild, I guess I'm going to go for this thing. He's got a detailed idea of the way it should sound and feel. And then that discrepancy is even more valuable because he doesn't just perceive a discrepancy, he can now perceive a more subtle discrepancy. Smaller and smaller differences between the way he wants to sound and the way he actually sounds. And with that, he can actually move with more efficiency towards the way he wants to sound, doing what, and I promise I'm trying to make this a word, it's called doableizing. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. Okay, and then that follows into his next intent anyway. So let's do a little more play with this. Where are y'all from in the front row? You're just the front row, so I'm looking at your ties. They look really nice. Where are y'all from?
Northern Illinois.
Oh, okay. So did any of you come to the thing that I did with Chris? Okay, great. Let me have, can I have, you were not a trumpet player? Who's a trumpet player that hasn't seen this? Can I have you right there in the middle? Can you come up on stage real quick? It's real easy, I promise. Well, I didn't do anything yet. What's your name?
Johnny L.
Johnny. Oh, wait.
Johnny L.
Johnny L. Johnny L. One word. Johnny L. One word. Okay. All I want you to do, Johnny L, is to pick up that trumpet case. What'd you notice?
There's not a trumpet there.
Correct, or maybe a monet that no one knows about. So explain to them what just happened.
I thought it was going to be the weight of a trumpet case, like the single trumpet, but it's like at least like 10.
Yeah, it's 30 pounds.
Okay.
So go ahead and put it down. So, Johnny, if you had to take a guess at how many times you picked up a trumpet case in your life, what's your number?
Over, I have no idea.
Take a guess. There's no wrong answer. I'm not going to ding you for not getting it right.
Over 10,000?
Over 10,000, maybe. And have you ever accidentally thrown it across the room when you haven't meant to?
No.
Right. So okay, you're pretty good at this. So 10,000 times, Johnny Ellis picked up trumpet cases, and it's always probably weighed, especially one like that that's only got one trumpet, between maybe 2 and 5 pounds, depending on what kind of trumpet you got. So he had a prediction about the way that should feel when he picks it up. His brain was making a prediction based on 10,000 times that it should feel about like this. And lo and behold, that was violated. There was an error, a big error. And so what we saw was he reached down there and was kind of, oh wait, that's heavy. And he made some adjustments, and he's an adult human, so he was still able to pick it up. So he's gone through that cycle once. He made a performance trial. There was a discrepancy, which he perceived, but now he's going to do something about it. So if we're going to give him another chance at that, would you pick it up again, please? Smoother and better. Yes, John. Now we can So what we saw there was a slight modification of what he did. He got a little closer to the case. He probably had a ready for a higher grip strength as he bent down. He probably engaged some muscles a little bit more than he did before so that he could pick it up without having that hitch. And so he moved what he did. He changed what he did because he perceived an error. He perceived a discrepancy between what he predicted and what he actually did. And if we had him do that 500 more times, that would be his new prediction. He would now predict that trumpet cases are about 30 pounds, which they are not. But thank you for playing my game. That's how prediction works in this. And that's why it's important that Chris Coletti was spending time in one of his early sessions clarifying his intent. He wanted to know how the music was supposed to go. I reworded what he said, but he wanted to hear it so that everything he does after that is either what he wants to do or not. And as a side effect, just making this even more effective and more efficient, rather than fumbling through and playing it poorly a few dozen or a few hundred times, he knows what he's aiming for each time. Non-trivial. This is a huge, huge benefit if you're looking to get better at a thing. So let's talk a little bit about attention. We got to perceive discrepancies, right? One thing we know about experts in the world, this is true, and if you haven't thought about this, I encourage you to think more about it. Experts pay attention to the world in different ways than non-experts. That means Whiff and Mark and Keith, and Bob, and everybody else who's in the room that are professors, they listen to things and feel things in different ways than non-experts. And this can be a little abstract with music, especially because we're all buried in music school right now, and sometimes it's hard to wow us. I mean, those of you that study with Caleb, I hope that you're continually wowed by how good that dude sounds on the trumpet. But for the rest of us, it's really hard to really get us totally floored at what an expert can do on the instrument. So I've got a soccer example. This is Ronaldo. This is Ronaldo from maybe 10 years ago before he turned into a big, arrogant booger. And so in this video, we're going to see him take 3 passes from this guy right in the corner. And Ronaldo's trying to score a goal. In the first trial, the first pass, this guy kicks it, and then as soon as he kicks it, the lights go off in the indoor stadium that they're in. Lights go totally off. And Ronaldo does a thing to get the ball in the net. Second kick, almost the same thing. As soon as the ball's kicked, lights go off. Third kick, the lights go off right before the ball is kicked. And you're going to see what Ronaldo does. Now, if that doesn't boggle your mind a little bit, I don't think you're thinking about it hard enough. Because what he's able to do is to get just look at the kicker, where the planting foot is, the speed of the backswing, some dynamic combination of how his ankle, knees, and hips swing towards the ball, the speed of that forward swing, and then probably some sound of when the ball is kicked. That's all he needs in order to make a really good guess about where the ball is going to be and when it's going to be there. That's stunning. And that's why he's able to be so good on the soccer pitch. Is he's able to look around and get great information from really small bits of the world. See, our brains and our bodies are not built to pay attention to everything at once. I thought about that before, but that's kind of an interesting thing. Gaze behavior is a really interesting way to see that. We can't see everything around us. We see in front of us, and we only see really good information from really a very small bit of the visual field. And then we move our eyes around and we sort of do get more information that way if we put things together. So the same thing happens with auditory attention, right? If we're really quiet for about 5 seconds, just what do you hear? That's some projector or heating thing right there that you have not been paying attention to probably until I shut up and we watch Ronaldo game. We can pay attention to the world in different ways. We have the ability to allocate attention in different ways. So experts pay attention to the important stuff. That's it. But as practicers, our question should be, what should we be paying attention to? What are expert practicers paying attention to when they practice? Well, here's Amy McCabe, a spectacular human, first female principal trumpet player in the Marine Band, President's Own in DC, spectacular trumpet player. We're going to watch her practice here for a second. This is Gakowski's Concerto for Trumpet. So she's going to, in this 45 seconds, she's going to take 2 trials that start there, and this is all on the horn. And you'll hear that she's already got a pretty good idea of what she's aiming for, so she's just calibrating at this point. So she takes 2 trials from there, and then she goes back to the far left. And just notice things. So what's she paying attention to there? This one's rhetorical, because I'm going to tell you. Expert practicers pay attention to matches and mismatches. Thinking back to the brain slide, they pay attention to matches and mismatches, because mismatches give them the best information about what they should do that changes the sound to make what they play closer to what they intend to play. It's the mismatch. Now, let's watch that same clip again in real time, and I'm going to show you what she's paying attention to. So here we're going to see whether the prediction matched what actually came out the instrument, and here we're going to see what she did about it. And notice what happens. That is incredibly fast learning. Incredibly fast. Now, we saw her do a couple of things there. She slowed things down, she sort of took things out of time, she repeated some sections, all these things that we might refer to as practice strategies. You probably at some point have been taught practice strategies. Like you can, if you have trouble with rhythm, you can go da 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 da, and then da 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 da, and then that makes it better. Fine. None of that is wrong. But what we're seeing her do right there, it's not like she has some pre-planned idea of what she wants to do in these couple of minutes of practice. She's making incredibly complex decisions based on the sound of every trial and whether it aligns with the way she wants to sound or not. incredibly complex and incredibly fast updating. Practice more like Amy. And I know she's got like a nice clip happening there. Rest time is also an important thing. That's another presentation I got, but you don't have to practice that quickly. But that kind of updating happening very, very fast is what we should all aim for. Okay, I just saw this in the newspaper the other day, but it's worth a look. So here's my truth bomb. Experts perform fewer errors because they practice fewer errors. Now think about that for a second. I think when I say that, a lot of people what they hear is experts are really good at their instruments, and so they don't make a lot of mistakes during practice. But what I mean is precisely the opposite. Experts perform better because they design tasks as they practice that are less likely to elicit error. Let me show you what I mean. And this is the word doable as. So here we're going to watch Garrett Flowers. He's playing this hard piece, right? It's hard. And we're going to see him take 3 trials at this. He's going to doable as some things. And that just means he's going to take this really difficult task, and he's immediately going to turn it into something he can succeed at. And this is a prime way that expert practicers reduce error. They get used to playing things beautifully because they do more of that in the practice room. So he's going to play this hard thing once. You're going to hear some error, normal. So he plays the entire passage from there to there. And there's some errors present. Fine. Then he takes some thinking time. If you're not taking thinking time in your practice session, put it in there. You got to think about what just happened. Think about what you're going to do next. If you're just on autopilot all the time, or you've got some app on your phone up, you got to take some thinking time. It's necessary. Then he's going to take a second trial, and the second trial he starts here, down an octave, but he keeps the rhythm, the phrase shape, and then you'll immediately hear there's far fewer errors in the second trial. He's modified the task so that it's something he can really do beautifully. And then he takes some more thinking time. Got to put some thinking time in there. And then he does a third trial, and what he does here, he starts wind patterning up there, like sort of blowing air and singing through, and you can follow along. And then when he gets to here, he starts playing, again down an octave, no half valve there, but he maintains the time, the rhythm, the phrase shape. He may not do one of those trills or something. There's something, flutter tone maybe he leaves off. And then there's in the last trial there, that's the doable as task, there's almost no error. There's one little bobble, but you'll hear it. Gareth is principal trumpet at the International Contemporary Ensemble in New York. He's also an associate musician at the Met. Incredible player. than just repeat that difficult thing a lot of times, racking up bad practice, racking up the errors. See, a lot of times when we're working on tricky things, we'll do it poorly about 50 times, and then we'll do it right once, and then we think, oh, I got it. No, you don't got it. You only got it once right, after 50 times of not doing the thing you wanted to. So the only thing your brain knows is how to do the right thing after a lot of times of doing the wrong thing. So, make things easier for yourself. Design tasks that have you making more sounds that are the sounds you intend to make. In fact, there's an interesting, and I won't go into this, but there's an interesting line of research in video game data. About 85%. If you're playing about 85% of your notes the way you want them to, we have reason to believe that that's maybe where the brain operates at its best. So about 15% error. Hasn't been done in music, and it probably won't be done in music for a long time because there's a lot of complications. But aim for that. It's a nice place to aim. We're not going to watch Tony Hawk, we're not going to watch Chris practice one more. So, in closing, if you want to spend time, effort, energy, attention, cognitive resources like an expert, here's what I want you to do. Now, I recognize that, I recognize the irony in this, that no one in this room has gotten any better at practicing in the past 45 minutes. No one got any better. Because I can't talk you into doing it. Just like you can't think yourself into doing it. So it depends on what you do after this, to change what you do while you practice, to optimize your learning. And so if you really want to practice more like expert musicians practice, here are 3 questions you can ask yourself the next time you get in a practice room to optimize your learning. The first is, do you know what you intend to play for every single trial? Experts do. They may not be able to report on what it is they're doing, but we're very sure that they know what they're aiming for almost every single trial, with an incredible amount of detail. So take some time to think about that. What am I actually trying to play right now with my instrument? If the instrument's telling you, you're not doing it right, make an intent. Refine that intent. Then, are you paying attention to discrepancies between what you intend and what you actually play? If you don't hear those discrepancies, if your attention is on TikTok or what's happening in the room next to you or what you've got to do in your performance next week, then you don't get that error. And that error is precious. That error tells you something about what you need to change in order to play more notes the way you want to. That error is perhaps the most important thing that's happening in your practice room. Pay attention to it. Learn to like it, even. Gosh, there's a wellness thing. If you can learn to really enjoy the errors because they offer you information about what to do next, that's a gift. If you want to be a happier practicing musician, I can say this as somebody who has been unhappy for many years, even though I ostensibly sounded pretty good at the trumpet. Be happier as you play the instrument. It's a life-changing thing. So, are you paying attention to discrepancies? And then are you making decisions as you practice to make more sounds the way you want to? Modify tasks so that you're about 85% what you want to. I'm happy to share this slide with anybody if you just want to come check it out. I'm sure. Anyway. So you can take a picture if you want, but those are 3 questions you can ask yourself every single practice session, or of your students even. For those of you that do want to be teachers, help your students do this. It's how they can learn quicker and do more things. And then at the end of the day, do these things. Get sleep, 7 to 9 hours, as many nights as you can. As strange as it feels, the brain is housed in the body. It is at the whims of biochemistry. And as it happens, we have the capacity to do some things for our body that are better than others. Sleep is great. It's the janitorial system of the brain. It clears out these proteins, these beta amyloids that lead to cognitive decline. Deep sleep is how we consolidate memories, which makes it more likely that we're going to remember the thing that we actually practice. So, sleep. Make decisions to sleep. Make it a priority. I say this every time and I get laughed at every time, but if you're ever choosing between practicing more and sleeping, sleep every time. Every single time. If you haven't practiced, then you've got to build your schedule a little better. But if you're ever stuck between those 2 things, it's like 11 o'clock. It's like, man, I got to practice. But I've only slept for 4 hours yesterday. Sleep. Sleep. Unfortunately, we live in a time and a place where putting unhealthy foods in our body is easier and cheaper than putting healthy foods in our body. That's just a part of being where we are when we are. So as much as you're able to, and as much as you're comfortable doing, put healthy things in your body. Your brain will learn better. I mean, I'm not trying to judge anybody's lifestyle, but I'm saying that your brain will be happier when you put healthy foods in your body. Same with moving your body as much as you're able to. make decisions to move your body. Your brain will be happier. And stress does really weird things to learning. That's another class too. It's not like it makes learning bad, it just makes us remember really weird things. So as much as you're able to, take small important parts of your day and choose to do things that make you happy. Make it a choice, not just something that emerges from your busy schedule. Choose to take 5 minutes out of your day and do something that makes you genuinely happy. Operating with that sort of agency is likely to lower your stress levels and make you a better learner. And I know that's hard, especially if you're in the throes of music school and you're stressed about juries and auditions and all sorts of stuff. But as much as you're able to, do those things. My name's Micah. I've really enjoyed chatting with you about this. If this is like the dorkiest thing I love, I just like Kevin, Sergeant Jibo, I don't know what you guys call him, just like Jibo said, if you ever want to send me stuff, if you're ever stuck with practicing, if you think you're practicing ineffectively and you want another, not your teacher person to help you think through some things, please email me. This is what I do all day right now. I'm working on my dissertation. 8 hours a day of watching practice and coding practice and analyzing practice. I am more than happy to help anybody practice on an individual level if you're into it. Because practice is like the dark matter of the musical universe, right? Like, we almost never look at it directly, but it's responsible for like 98% of the learning that we do in our musical lives, especially once you get to Whiff and Mark's age. It's like most of it, right? And so I think we all can stand to gain by paying a little bit more attention to the quality of our practice so that you can optimize your learning, accomplish your musical and human goals. Thanks a lot for having me. Thanks for listening to me talk for this whole time, because I know you guys got jumping coming up.